The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the corporate headquarters as Marcus walked through the corridors with measured steps. His colleagues nodded respectfully as he passed, some averting their eyes, others offering brief acknowledgements. There was something different about Marcus compared to the eager-to-please executives who frantically tried to win everyone's approval. Where others sought smiles and validation, Marcus commanded something far more valuable: respect born from strength, competence, and an unshakable understanding of human nature. This transformation hadn't happened overnight. 3 years ago, Marcus had been like everyone else, desperately trying to be liked, bending over backward to accommodate every request, sacrificing his own principles for the fleeting warmth of approval. He had been weak, and that weakness had made him a target for manipulation, disrespect, and eventual failure. But somewhere in the depths of his lowest moment, when he had lost both his promotion and the respect of his peers due to his people-pleasing nature, Marcus discovered a truth that would reshape his entire approach to life. Being liked is a position of weakness, while being respected is a position of power. The foundation of this realization rested on ancient wisdom that had guided leaders, warriors, and visionaries for centuries. Niccolo Machiavelli, the 16th century Italian philosopher and political strategist, had understood this principle when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. But fear and respect, while related, are not identical. Fear can breed resentment and rebellion, while respect creates genuine influence and lasting authority. The man who builds his life on respect rather than approval builds it on solid ground. Marcus had learned this lesson through painful experience. In his previous role, he had been the department's nice guy, always agreeing, always accommodating, always putting others' needs before his own. When budget cuts came, he was the first to volunteer for reduced resources. When overtime was needed, he was the first to sacrifice his personal time. When credit was distributed, he was always generous in sharing it with others. He believed that his selflessness would be rewarded with loyalty and support. Instead, he discovered that his kindness was seen as weakness. His willingness to sacrifice was interpreted as a lack of personal value. His generosity with credit was viewed as an admission that he hadn't really earned it himself. The very people he had tried so hard to please began to see him as a pushover, someone who could be relied upon to give in under pressure, to accept less than he deserved, and to prioritize their comfort over his own success. The turning point came during a crucial project presentation. Marcus had done the majority of the work, sacrificed weeks of his personal time, and developed the innovative strategies that made the project a success. But when the presentation day arrived, his colleague Sarah, who had contributed minimally but possessed a strong sense of self-advocacy, positioned herself as the project lead. She spoke with confidence about her vision and her strategies, while Marcus sat quietly, not wanting to create conflict or appear selfish by claiming credit. The executives were impressed with Sarah. She received the promotion that Marcus had been working toward for 2 years. She received the recognition that his efforts had earned. And Marcus received a pat on the back and a comment about being such a team player. In that moment, sitting in the conference room after everyone had left, Marcus understood that his desire to be liked had cost him everything he had actually worked for. That night, Marcus began studying the principles that successful leaders throughout history had understood instinctively. He read Machiavelli's The Prince, Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and the biographies of leaders who had commanded respect rather than merely sought approval. He discovered that strength, not likability, was the foundation of true influence. He learned that respect was earned through competence, consistency, and the courage to stand by one's principles even when it was uncomfortable. The first principle Marcus internalized was that being liked often requires compromising one's authentic self. When we desperately seek approval, we mold ourselves into whatever shape others desire at the moment. We become chameleons, constantly shifting our positions, our values, and our decisions based on what we believe will generate the most positive response from those around us. This behavior creates a fundamental weakness because it makes us predictable, malleable, and ultimately unreliable. People who operate from a need to be liked make decisions based on external validation rather than internal wisdom. They agree to unreasonable requests because saying no might cause disappointment. They fail to advocate for their own interests because self-promotion might seem selfish. They avoid difficult conversations because conflict might damage relationships. In doing so, they surrender their power to others, becoming reactive rather than proactive, followers rather than leaders. Marcus recognized this pattern in his own behavior. He had spent so much energy trying to anticipate what others wanted from him that he had lost touch with what he wanted for himself. He had become so focused on maintaining harmony that he had forgotten how to create value. He had become so afraid of disappointing others that he had ended up disappointing himself. Most of all, the second principle he discovered was that respect is earned through demonstrated value and consistent standards. Unlike likability, which can be manufactured through superficial charm and people-pleasing behaviors, respect must be built through authentic competence and unwavering principles. Respect comes when others recognize that you have something valuable to offer and that you will not compromise your standards for their convenience. This realization led Marcus to examine what value he actually brought to his organization and his relationships. He began to focus on developing his expertise, honing his skills, and creating tangible results that spoke for themselves. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, he concentrated on becoming exceptionally good at specific things that mattered to the success of his team and his company. He also established clear boundaries and standards for how he would and would not be treated. Where he had previously accepted unreasonable demands and disrespectful behavior in the name of being agreeable, he began to calmly but firmly communicate his expectations. He learned to say no to requests that would compromise his priorities or values, and he stopped apologizing for maintaining his standards. The transformation was not immediate, and it was not always comfortable. Some people who had grown accustomed to his unlimited availability and flexibility were initially resistant to the changes. A few colleagues who had benefited from his previous people-pleasing behavior expressed disappointment when he began to advocate for himself more assertively. There were moments when Marcus questioned whether he was becoming too harsh, too selfish, or too difficult to work with. But as weeks turned to months, the results spoke for themselves. Projects that Marcus led were completed more efficiently because he insisted on clear roles and accountability. His team members performed better because they knew exactly what was expected of them and understood that mediocrity would not be accepted. Other departments began seeking his input on challenging problems because they knew he would provide honest, valuable insights rather than telling them what they wanted to hear. Most importantly, Marcus noticed that his relationships actually improved. Even as his likability in the traditional sense may have decreased, people began to trust him more because they knew he would be consistent in his responses and honest in his communications. They respected his time because he respected it himself. They valued his opinions because they knew he had thought carefully about them rather than simply echoing popular sentiment. The third principle Marcus mastered was understanding that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. This concept became the cornerstone of his transformation and represented the most profound shift in his thinking. He realized that external destruction, whether through criticism, rejection, or failure, could only devastate someone who was still dependent on external validation for their sense of self-worth. The process of destroying one's weak self is not about becoming callous or indifferent to others. Rather, it involves identifying and eliminating the aspects of personality and behavior that make one vulnerable to manipulation, disrespect, and failure. It means developing such a strong internal foundation that external storms cannot shake one's core stability. For Marcus, this meant systematically identifying and addressing his weaknesses. His need for approval had made him agreeable to the point of self-destruction. So he developed the courage to disagree when his principles or knowledge suggested a different path. His fear of conflict had made him avoid necessary confrontations. So he learned to address problems directly and professionally before they became larger issues. His tendency to undervalue his own contributions had made him invisible in crucial moments. So he practiced articulating his value and achievements with confidence and accuracy. The destruction of weakness was not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of self-examination and improvement. Marcus established regular practices for assessing his decisions, behaviors, and outcomes. He asked himself difficult questions. Am I making this choice because it's right, or because I want to be liked? Am I avoiding this conversation because it's unnecessary, or because I'm afraid of the response? Am I accepting this treatment because it's reasonable, or because I don't believe I deserve better? This self-awareness allowed him to catch himself before falling back into old patterns. When he felt the familiar urge to agree with something he disagreed with, he paused and chose a more authentic response. When he noticed himself accepting unreasonable demands, he stopped and established appropriate boundaries. When he recognized himself minimizing his own contributions, he corrected course and communicated his value clearly. As this process continued, Marcus discovered something remarkable. As he became less concerned with being liked, he actually became more genuinely likable to the people who mattered. The respect he commanded attracted individuals who valued strength, competence, and authenticity. The boundaries he maintained filtered out people who only wanted to take advantage of his resources without offering value in return. The standards he upheld created an environment where high-quality relationships could flourish. This principle extended beyond professional relationships into every area of his life. In personal relationships, Marcus stopped accepting disrespectful treatment from friends who had grown accustomed to his unlimited patience. He began to invest his time and energy in relationships with people who appreciated his value and reciprocated his respect. In romantic relationships, he stopped trying to be the perfect partner and instead focused on being an authentic one, which attracted partners who were genuinely compatible with his true self rather than his performed self. The transformation also affected how Marcus approached challenges and setbacks. Previously, criticism or failure would devastate him because his self-worth was tied to external approval. Now, having built his identity on internal standards and genuine competence, external criticism became information to evaluate rather than attacks to defend against. He could assess feedback objectively, incorporate what was useful, and dismiss what was not, without his self-esteem hanging in the balance. This resilience became one of his greatest assets. In a business environment where change was constant and pressure was intense, Marcus's ability to maintain his equilibrium while others panicked or crumbled under stress made him invaluable to his organization. Leaders knew they could count on him to remain rational during crises, to make decisions based on logic rather than emotion, and to maintain his standards even when others were willing to compromise theirs for short-term relief. The fourth principle that emerged from Marcus's transformation was the understanding that power, real power, comes not from controlling others but from controlling oneself. The Machiavellian mindset is often misunderstood as being manipulative or ruthless toward others, but its true wisdom lies in the ruthless management of one's own weaknesses and the disciplined development of one's own strengths. Self-control manifested in Marcus's life in numerous ways. He learned to control his emotional reactions, responding thoughtfully rather than reactively to challenging situations. He developed the discipline to stick to his priorities even when others pressured him to abandon them for their convenience. He cultivated the patience to pursue long-term goals, even when short-term sacrifices were required. This self-mastery created a form of power that was unassailable because it was internal rather than external. Unlike power that depends on position, resources, or the cooperation of others, the power that comes from self-control cannot be taken away by external circumstances. Economic downturns cannot diminish it, organizational changes cannot eliminate it, and other people's decisions cannot undermine it. Marcus began to notice that others were naturally drawn to this type of internal strength. In meetings, people looked to him for guidance not because of his title, but because of his demonstrated ability to remain calm and think clearly under pressure. Colleagues sought his advice not because he told them what they wanted to hear, but because they trusted his judgment and knew he would give them honest, valuable insights. This attraction to strength rather than weakness is a fundamental aspect of human psychology that Marcus had not previously understood. While people might initially prefer those who agree with them and accommodate their wishes, they ultimately respect and follow those who demonstrate genuine competence and unwavering principles. They may enjoy the company of someone who makes them feel good about themselves in the moment, but they trust and rely on someone who makes good decisions consistently over time. The fifth principle Marcus internalized was that authenticity and strength are inseparable. Many people believe they must choose between being genuine and being successful, assuming that success requires compromising their values or pretending to be someone they're not. Marcus discovered that the opposite was true. Lasting success requires deep authenticity, combined with the strength to maintain that authenticity under pressure. Authentic strength means knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will and will not accept, and then having the courage to live according to those standards regardless of external pressure. It means being honest about your capabilities and limitations, confident in your value, and unwavering in your principles. This type of authenticity actually makes one stronger rather than more vulnerable, because it eliminates the exhausting effort required to maintain false personas and the anxiety that comes from fearing exposure. Marcus had previously believed that showing his true self would make him vulnerable to rejection or criticism. He had thought that agreeing with everyone and accommodating every request would protect him from conflict and disapproval. Instead, he discovered that his attempts to be universally liked had made him universally disposable. When he began to show his authentic self, complete with boundaries, standards, and occasionally unpopular opinions. He became someone people could count on, respect, and value. This authenticity also freed him from the exhausting work of trying to be different things to different people. Instead of constantly calculating what each person wanted to hear and adjusting his responses accordingly, he could simply be consistent in his values and communications. This consistency made him more trustworthy and reliable, qualities that are far more valuable in the long term than momentary likability. The sixth principle that guided Marcus's transformation was understanding the difference between fear-based respect and value-based respect. Machiavelli's famous observation about fear versus love is often interpreted as an endorsement of intimidation and cruelty, but Marcus understood it more nuancedly. The goal is not to make people afraid of you, but to make them respect your boundaries, your standards, and your capabilities. Fear-based respect is unstable and temporary. It depends on the continued ability to threaten or punish, and it breeds resentment that can eventually lead to rebellion or sabotage. Value-based respect, on the other hand, is stable and enduring because it is based on genuine appreciation for someone's contributions, capabilities, and character. Marcus focused on earning value-based respect by consistently delivering high-quality work, maintaining his standards under pressure, and treating others with firmness but fairness. He became known for his reliability, his competence, and his integrity. People respected him not because they were afraid of negative consequences if they didn't, but because they genuinely valued what he brought to every situation. This distinction became particularly important in his leadership roles. When Marcus was promoted to department head, he could have used his position to demand compliance through authority and consequences. Instead, he focused on earning respect through his decisions, his support for his team members' growth, and his willingness to take responsibility for both successes and failures. His team members began to respect him because they saw that he made decisions based on sound reasoning rather than personal preference. But he advocated for their interests when appropriate, and that he held himself to the same high standards he expected from them. This respect translated into genuine cooperation, innovation, and loyalty that was far more valuable than mere compliance would have been. The seventh principle Marcus mastered was the art of strategic vulnerability. While building strength and commanding respect, he learned that there is a difference between being invulnerable and being strong. True strength sometimes involves showing vulnerability in strategic ways that build trust and connection without compromising one's position or standards. Strategic vulnerability means being honest about limitations and mistakes while maintaining confidence in one's overall competence. It means asking for help when appropriate while continuing to provide value to others. It means showing genuine emotion when warranted while maintaining emotional control in crucial moments. Marcus learned to admit when he didn't know something, which actually increased rather than decreased others' respect for him because it demonstrated self-awareness and honesty. He learned to acknowledge his mistakes quickly and take responsibility for them, which built trust because people knew he would be honest about problems rather than trying to hide or blame them on others. He learned to show appreciation for others' contributions, which strengthened relationships without compromising his own position. This strategic vulnerability prevented him from becoming cold, arrogant, or disconnected from others. It allowed him to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than mere intimidation or distance. It also protected him from the isolation that can come from being too strong or too distant from others. The eighth principle that guided Marcus's transformation was understanding that respect must be maintained through consistent action rather than past achievement. Unlike likability, which can sometimes coast on charm or past good deeds, respect must be earned continuously through ongoing demonstration of value, competence, and character. This meant that Marcus could never become complacent about his standards or his performance. He established systems for continuous improvement, regular self-assessment, and ongoing skill development. He understood that the moment he began to rely on his reputation rather than his current contributions, his respect would begin to erode. This principle also helped him understand why some people who had once been highly respected eventually lost that respect. They had begun to take their reputation for granted, lowering their standards or coasting on past achievements. They had stopped growing, stopped contributing, or stopped maintaining the behaviors that had earned them respect in the first place. Marcus committed to avoiding this trap by staying hungry for improvement, remaining open to feedback, and continuously raising his own standards. He sought out challenging assignments that would push him to grow, solicited honest feedback from trusted colleagues, and regularly assessed whether his current performance matched his reputation. The ninth principle Marcus internalized was that true power lies in the ability to walk away. This concept, deeply rooted in negotiation theory and relationship dynamics, became one of his most valuable tools for maintaining respect and avoiding exploitation. When someone knows that you need their approval, their cooperation, or their resources more than they need yours, they hold power over you. They can make unreasonable demands, treat you poorly, or take advantage of your desperation because they know you will accept it rather than risk losing their support. Marcus developed what he called walkaway power by building his skills, expanding his network, and creating multiple options in every important area of his life. In his career, this meant developing expertise that was valuable to multiple organizations, building relationships across industries, and maintaining financial stability that would allow him to leave a bad situation if necessary. This walkaway power was not something he used aggressively or frequently, but its existence fundamentally changed how others related to him. Colleagues and supervisors knew that Marcus was there because he chose to be, not because he had no other options. This knowledge made them more likely to treat him with respect, offer him reasonable terms, and value his contributions appropriately. The principle extended beyond professional relationships. In personal relationships, Marcus's willingness to walk away from people who consistently treated him poorly protected him from manipulation and abuse. Friends and romantic partners knew that his presence in their lives was a choice rather than a dependency, which encouraged them to treat him with the respect he deserved. This walkaway power was not about being cold, distant, or threatening to leave at the first sign of difficulty. Rather, it was about maintaining such a strong sense of self-worth and such diverse options that he never felt trapped in situations that didn't serve his highest interests. This internal security allowed him to be more generous, more patient, and more loyal because he knew he was choosing these behaviors from a position of strength rather than weakness. The 10th principle that shaped Marcus's transformation was understanding that respect and results are inseparable. While likability can exist independently of competence, some people are charming but ineffective. Genuine respect is always tied to the ability to produce valuable outcomes. Marcus focused relentlessly on developing his ability to deliver results. He studied his industry, honed his technical skills, and learned to manage projects and people effectively. He measured his performance objectively and continuously looked for ways to improve his outcomes. He understood that all the personal strength and boundary setting in the world would be meaningless if he couldn't actually perform at a high level. This focus on results protected him from the trap of confusing activity with achievement or effort with effectiveness. He learned to distinguish between being busy and being productive, between working hard and working smart, between good intentions and good outcomes. This distinction became crucial to his success because it allowed him to focus his energy on activities that actually created value rather than just consuming time. The emphasis on results also helped him build credibility with colleagues and superiors who might have been skeptical of his transformation. When Marcus began setting boundaries and advocating for himself more assertively, some people initially assumed he was becoming difficult or prima donna-like. However, when these changes coincided with improved performance and better outcomes, it became clear that his new approach was beneficial for everyone involved. As Marcus's story illustrates, the journey from being liked to being respected is not about becoming harsh, cold, or indifferent to others. Rather, it is about developing the internal strength and competence that makes one genuinely valuable to others, combined with the self-respect that prevents one from accepting poor treatment or compromising essential values for the sake of approval. The man who destroys his weak self, the self that needs constant validation, that avoids difficult conversations, that accepts less than he deserves, becomes truly indestructible because his strength comes from within rather than from external circumstances. He cannot be destroyed by criticism because he evaluates feedback objectively rather than taking it personally. He cannot be destroyed by rejection because his self-worth is not dependent on others' approval. He cannot be destroyed by failure because he views setbacks as learning opportunities rather than reflections of his fundamental value. This transformation requires courage, discipline, and patience. It means facing uncomfortable truths about one's current weaknesses and taking responsibility for changing them. It means having difficult conversations and setting boundaries that might initially displease others. It means prioritizing long-term respect over short-term approval. and authentic relationships over superficial popularity. But the rewards of this transformation extend far beyond professional success or social status. When a person builds their life on respect rather than likability, they create a foundation of genuine self-worth that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. They develop relationships based on mutual value and appreciation rather than dependency and manipulation. They become the kind of person others naturally look to for leadership, guidance, and support because they demonstrate the strength and competence that inspire confidence. The Machiavellian mindset, properly understood, is not about manipulating or controlling others, but about mastering oneself so completely that external manipulation becomes impossible. It is about becoming so strong internally that one can afford to be generous externally, so secure in one's own value that one does not need to diminish others to feel important, and so confident in one's principles that one can maintain them even under pressure. Marcus's transformation from a people-pleasing pushover to a respected leader illustrates that this change is possible for anyone willing to undertake the challenging but rewarding work of destroying their weak self and building their strong self. The process requires honestly assessing one's current weaknesses, developing genuine competence and value, establishing and maintaining clear boundaries, and consistently acting from a position of internal strength rather than external need. The ultimate goal is not to be feared or to dominate others, but to be respected for one's authentic value and to live according to one's highest standards regardless of external pressure. This approach creates a life of genuine fulfillment, meaningful relationships, and sustainable success that is built on solid foundations rather than shifting sands of popular opinion. In a world that often encourages people to compromise their values for acceptance, to lower their standards to avoid conflict, and to prioritize others' comfort over their own growth, choosing the path of strength and authenticity requires courage. But for those willing to walk this path, the rewards include not just external success, but internal peace, genuine self-respect, and the kind of influence that comes from being truly valuable rather than merely likable. The man who destroys his weak self and builds his strong self creates something that cannot be taken away by economic downturns, organizational changes, or other people's decisions. He builds a foundation of competence, character, and self-respect that serves as an unshakable base for whatever challenges and opportunities life may bring. In doing so, he discovers that being respected is indeed far more powerful than being liked, and that true strength comes not from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. This is the essence of the Machiavellian mindset, not the manipulation of others for selfish gain, but the development of oneself to such a degree that manipulation becomes unnecessary. When one possesses genuine value, maintains authentic standards, and demonstrates consistent competence, respect follows naturally. And with respect comes the kind of influence and success that can weather any storm and seize any opportunity. The transformation is complete when external validation is no longer needed because internal validation is sufficient. When approval from others is appreciated but not required because self-approval is secure. And when the opinions of others are considered but not controlling because one's own judgment has been proven reliable through experience and growth. This is the true power of destroying one's weak self. It creates a strong self that is truly indestructible because it is built on the solid foundation of genuine value, authentic character, and uncompromising standards. In the end, Marcus's journey represents the possibility available to anyone willing to choose strength over weakness, authenticity over performance, and respect over likability. The path is not easy, but it leads to a life of genuine fulfillment, meaningful relationships, and sustainable success that no external force can destroy, because it is built on the unshakable foundation of a strong, authentic, and valuable self.